Okay, so hello guys, and good evening to everyone, and thank you again for tuning in to TechPH online Saturday session. So tonight we will have our 10th online Saturday session on design and development, and I'm Luis Baring, your host. So today we are joined by Google developer expert Joshua de Guzman, who will talk about Flutter. So it's a very interesting framework that will let you develop for both Android and iOS. And I think soon on web as well. So just a reminder to everyone, you can always leave your questions in the comment section, and you can also register to the link in the video description to get the references discussed during the talks, and also our the presentation, the slides of our speakers for tonight. And next week will be about Android and iOS native. So also, additionally, we will have Wednesday workshop. So thank you for everyone who joined us last week in our first Wednesday workshop on paginated reports with Power BI. So we will have that again, and hopefully we can have that every week to help you learn a new skill in tech. And also, please continue to visit our page on Facebook and invite your friends as well to join our community on Facebook. Again, that's TechPH.org on Facebook. And we also have a Facebook channel wherein you can view or watch the videos of our past online sessions and our upcoming workshops. And additionally, um, this session is powered by recruitday.com. So if you know anyone who is looking for a job as an Android developer, or if you're someone who's looking for an opportunity as an Android developer, what you can do tonight is scan that QR code that you're seeing on your screen, and it will bring you to the Recruit Day page where you can apply or refer your friends to this Android developer job opportunity, and you can earn referral incentive for referring your friends, and if they get successfully hired for that. And on July, we will have further into design. So we have invited practitioners on UX and product design who will talk about uh, these topics further. And just an introduction to that. If you want to learn about design thinking, I think it's going to be relevant for our future sessions. You can scan the QR code and be part of our first online self-paced session, and that QR code will bring you to Recruit Day's bootcamp page where you can browse all the sessions that you can take online. All right. So tonight, again, we have Joshua de Guzman. Joshua, how are you today?
Right. Hi, Luis. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you again for joining us. So Joshua has been a partner of the community for so long, and he's also a very young Google developer expert. Not everyone can say that. It's a very big accomplishment for everyone's information, and Joshua is taking the time tonight to share to us his knowledge and experience on Flutter, which is a very interesting. You call it framework, right, Josh?
Yes. Typically, we call it a framework or either a toolkit, but not application development framework. But framework would actually do.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll learn more about that tonight. So for everyone who has questions while the session is progressing, you can simply leave them in the comment section, and we'll try to answer all of your questions at the end of the session. So I think Josh, the floor is all yours. And
Okay.
again, so thank you so much in advance.
Okay. Great. I'll set this up. Okay. So first of all, thank you, Luis, for giving me an opportunity to give a talk here at TechPH. We really thank you for hosting this kind of series, especially where everyone's is at their own homes. And yeah, pretty much our topic for today is building Flutter apps for Android and iOS. And in this talk, hopefully you'll get more confident on using Flutter You'll get the chance to actually know what are the things and the tools that you need for you to be able to create Flutter apps. And after describing what Flutter actually is and how it works, we'll try to start right away on the live coding, where we will be dealing with two practical approach. The first one is where we'll be building a prototype out of a dribble design that I just extracted online. Last but not the least is we'll try to get a basic understanding how you would actually manage a state in Flutter, because often get a lot of questions from our meetups and webinars that they're actually curious what is the best state management or architecture to use. But in this talk, I'll just try to make it not too complex, because we're just trying to learn the fundamentals of state management at the end of this talk. And yeah, this is the app that we're going to create. If you're interested on coding collaboratively with me later, I'll share the link to the assets and to the repo where you could start building this course application together as I share with you the slides. And yeah, our talk for today is focused on using Flutter for mobile app development. So, as you all know, we have two major platforms, at least for mobile. First one is iOS. So, imagine as if you have some idea that is very successful and you publish it on the iOS store. The problem is your users start asking when are you going to release the counterpart Android versions. For example, some of your users are asking, I want to transfer my data, I want to transfer the user experience I've had in iOS to Android, because right now I'm switching to an Android device. So the problem you have right now is, since you have written this in Swift or probably in Objective C, if you're that if you're that good, then pretty much you'll end up having to maintain two separate code bases. So writing a new Android app, probably you'll have some time and pay some resources to learn how to code Kotlin or Java, building an application with pretty much just calls an API or just renders an e-commerce application, and ending up having, if not almost the same user experience, user interface, with using two different efforts on maintaining and creating these two separate apps on two separate platforms. So the platforms we're talking about here is either Android or the iOS. And another challenge on building a native application, at least from experience, is supporting multiple screen densities. So at least for iOS, no, we have a very limited amount of variants from the devices, since we only have one manufacturer, which is Apple. You only have to support probably smaller screens like SEs and iPhone S7 and 8, to medium screens like X, like 11, and larger screens like iPad, iPad Air, and even iPad Mini. Although if you're someone who's already built something in grounded, built something in Android or in iOS, then pretty much you'll encounter these device fragmentation in terms of the device densities. So device densities pretty much means that the different devices we have with multiple screen resolutions. So for example, we have a Samsung S9, which has larger screens, Nexus 5 phones which have lower screen densities. So you have to take into consideration supporting these types of screen densities using two separate code bases, using two separate probably utility classes, computing the responsiveness of the application you have to enable to deliver your application at a better user experience. And you'll end up having many decisions to make. What's the best practices for building an Android app in Android? What's the best practices for building an iOS app? And there's a lot more to it. So let's think of ourselves as a developer or a designer and even a business to start with. So as you build a new app, you have to consider the reach. So with reach for mobile, we have two major app stores. We have Google Play Store, we have the Apple App Store, and if you want to, if you have identified your target audience, pretty much you'll end up wanting to deploy on these two separate platforms. So that's and that's the thing on having a large target audience. You have to be present on these two separate major app stores. Next one is you have to consider the resources that you have. What is the expertise? For example, you're an indie developer, you're only good at Swift or Objective C, then probably you'll end up having some formal training or some self-learned course on how to code Kotlin and Java and Android. Or if you're a company, probably you have to consider if they actually know the quirks on building native applications, because there's kind of a difference between the quirks on building a web app and a native app. So in a native app, you have to consider that the machine you're targeting has a limited resources. So you have to take into consideration that it has a limited memory, limited probably CPU cores for low-end devices, unlike web, which they people use it on their desktop browsers, which pretty much has a ton of these hardware specs. So there's a difference between the quirks on building a mobile app and web app. So you have to ensure that these developers you have are very familiar, or from at least familiar with the workarounds how you would build an application for mobile. Last but not least is if you're considering hiring two developers, since they're working on two separate platforms, you have to consider the budget. So the budget, if you never make a budget, then you can't go over the budget. But yeah, pretty much if you have this kind of budget as an indie developer, then pretty much you'll end up uh, having more, receiving more of the monetization that you receive from your app. If you're an indie developer, and if you're a company, then you'll save up as much as twice of what you would normally pay for two developers. Other considerations, the typical research, performance, monetization, security, and a lot more. Great. So, how does Flutter can actually help you overcome these challenges? The challenge on separating code bases, the challenge on separating the two developers working on two separate platforms. Well, Flutter is a UI toolkit. It's a framework that allows you to build beautifully designed applications using a single code base. So with Flutter, it's not an application development framework. It's not like Angular that constrains you how you would normally design your routing, your services. In Flutter, you are free to do whatever you want, which enables you to choose how you would implement your services, how you would implement your architecture, which you can choose from. There's a ton of it, which widely accepted by many. And last but not the least is you can choose however you want to uh, create the widgets of your UI. And the good thing about here, the three things I've mentioned, you give you the freedom on services layer, other implementation in Flutter, architecture, freedom on choosing what architecture you would like to use, freedom on how you would like to implement your UI. This gives you a lot of productivity, to be honest, uh, because these freedom that you have in building apps in Flutter gets you or gives you less worry if you are doing it right or doing it wrong. Well, the good thing about Flutter is there's a ton of documentation and articles what approach you would like to take instead of having the toolkit or the framework takes care of that for you. And Flutter is not just for mobile, even if we're just talking for mobile today. Flutter can be made deployed on web and desktop, which is currently on beta and technical preview, respectively. And you have to switch your SDK to the master channel, which we will be discussing later. Flutter allows you to create expressive UIs. Again, in Flutter, we don't have external design language, unlike in Android. If you have some experience building apps in Android, we use this design language, this extra design markup language called XML, where we try to design our components using XML tags that are particularly rendered and built on top of the Android SDK. And with iOS, also similar, uses XML under the hood, while you design your uh, UIs in the storyboard. In Flutter, you only have to code the UI together with the API classes that you create using Dart. So you only have to familiarize yourself with the Dart and the Flutter APIs. Meaning Flutter APIs is the classes that you would normally use to create an application in Flutter. Next is Flutter supports hot reload, which enables you to create applications at a much faster rate. So later we'll try to see the changes reflected on real time instead of actually waiting 2 to 3 minutes for it to load. And Flutter offers you a native experience. It uses Kia graphics engine, which allows itself to, instead of creating a bridge to uh, emulate the native equivalent component, it paints directly to the graphics card of your devices. For example, if you have a button, instead of looking for the equivalent uh, native component, it paints itself directly. So it's like there's a canvas where you could freely design and position whatever widget you would like to design for your app. Flutter is open, not in the sense that it's open source only, but the community is very supportive. Whenever you have a question, Stack Overflow, everyone's is trying to shows that they try to help you. And yeah, pretty much our community as well, Flutter Philippines, is very welcoming for every someone who's interested on learning how to code in Flutter or Dart. Great. So these are just some of the companies that uses Flutter. Definitely Google, because they're the ones who created it. They use this app toolkit for their AdWords, BMW, a large banking company, Capital One, and a lot more. Agenda, we pretty much talked about Flutter already. Try to start right away on the coding part with the prototyping, overview on the managing state. This is just a basic overview. We'll not try to discuss what block, what Redux, what Mobix is, because this talk is targeted for someone who's actually new to Flutter and interested on learning uh, the toolkit. Yeah. Yeah, so get started with Flutter. Well, you have to always think of this phrase. So I always share this with my slides. So everything in a Flutter is a widget. At least the things that you see in Flutter. So this button, the containers, the text, we call it widget. Well, others call it components, depending on how you would like to standardize it in your company. But everything in Flutter is a widget. Everything drawn in a Flutter is a widget. But other classes such as the API calls, system services, and pretty much they are plain dark old classes. And how would you normally start with Flutter is you probably need to install Flutter SDK. So I'll just share you the installation link. Otherwise, if you try to install Flutter tonight, we'll probably have an endless night of installation. But I guess that depends on your internet, because our internet here in the province is a bit slow. And yeah, some of the useful commands that we'll try to use later. Flutter Doctor, it gives you a hint whether your installation actually works well, or if there's an issue with your installation. Flutter Create, it's used for creating a Flutter project, surprisingly. And Flutter Run Verbose, it's used for running your Flutter app, again, surprisingly. Last but not least is installing dependencies. So we have this thing called dependencies. Dependencies are packages that are developed by third-party uh, developer or the Google Flutter team themselves, and it's uploaded on pub.dev, which aims to help you, boost your productivity instead of reinventing the wheel. So don't get confused with the word dependency. It's just the tool set already made available for you to boost your productivity. Some of the development tools that we will be using, which the only tool we will be using, Visual Studio Code, but you can also use Android Studio and Xcode. And some of the extensions that we have for the Visual Studio Code, Dart, Flutter, which will be helpful for building Flutter apps, PubSpec Assist, Flutter Awesome Snippets, Bracket Colorizer. So let's try to see these extensions. So this is the app that we're trying to create later. We'll just try to see the extension. So for Pair Colorizer, it allows you to draw, it matches the opening curly brace to the ending curly brace, so you would probably know what is the scope of this specific widget. Because in Flutter, everything you draw here is nested. Later, we'll try to see them in action as we create our very first Flutter app. PubSpec Assist, it allows you to add dependencies directly to your PubSpec YAML without uh, without going to the page of the dependency. So for example, I add it here, provider, I enter it, and I'll just press enter. I'll go to the PubSpec YAML, which is the very description of a Flutter application. So right here, it adds the provider. So that's PubSpec Assist. You don't have to worry visiting the the actual page of the dependencies. You only have to visit it if you would probably look for and read for the documentation. Other than that, we also have Flutter Awesome Snippets. Okay, we'll start with the live coding. It's a bit quick. So yeah, let's actually try to start. Okay, it's not moving. So if you're interested on joining me in this webinar, feel free to visit this link. It's joshuadeguzman.net talks design Flutter apps for mobile. Great. So yeah, I'll just give you probably one moment to visit the website. Okay. Okay. I guess pretty much every one of you has already visited the website. No? So if you visited the website, you should be able to see the resources section. Also, we also have the extensions there, so don't have to worry about finding them later. We have the assets. You have to download it. So later on, we'll try to see how we can import assets in Flutter. Next is we have the starter code in GitHub, which is a very plain old Dart app. You just have to download the zip. You just have to ensure that you are on the tip of the dev starter pack, not in the master. Otherwise, you're cheating. And yeah, we can start. So this is the app that we're trying to build. It's a bit slow. Yeah, I guess I just have to stop. Just stop this emulator for a while because it's unneeded. So probably my internet's a bit slow. Okay. Okay. Great. Also, I almost forgot. I've included as well the Figma file. So this is a cool one. We actually have a Figma prototype open, so we can inspect the colors, the images that we use, the actual font sizes without ballparking the actual sizes of this one. So it's a bit easy for us to be able to follow along. So I'll just try to close this one and try my luck. Try my luck to start a project. So as you can see here, the command for creating a project, we have to zoom. So I think by default, if you are already in the SDK, probably you're curious about my version. I'm on the stable version of the SDK. I'll just try to. It's a bit slow. My internet's a bit slow tonight. Okay, so as you can see here, I'm on 1.17.2. So that's stable. That's not the latest. I think there's already, not sure if there's a 3, but I guess this is the stable SDK we have so far. And Flutter create, we just have to specify the org. So probably org that example. And depending on the project name I would like to name my project is course app. All right, press enter. This should create a project for you. So again, this is not yet the final output, but we'll try to build this together tonight. as we start with, yeah. Hmm. It's done. Vicode course app. I'll open this to the Visual Studio Code. It's a bit dark here. So here we'll just try to run short commands. The Flutter run, the Flutter uh, analyze. So for us to be able to just see that we created the app successfully. So just have to enter flutter run dash v. This is the command for running the very bare bone Flutter app that we have. So this is the structure that we have for a Flutter app. We have the Android and iOS, which you use for communicating with native APIs if it's not available in the pub.dev. You also have the pubspec.yaml, which is the very manifest of uh, your Flutter app. It describes the dependencies, it describes the current version of your Flutter app. And yeah, pretty much that's the pubspec. And this is the, okay, this is the app, right? I guess it's not yet running. Okay. So my laptop, it's a bit slow tonight. I'll just try to close this one. Right. Okay, we're still running our very first counter app. It's a bit slow tonight. Uh, hmm. Okay, at least you get more time on downloading the resources. Thanks, Luis, for sharing it. Yeah. Okay, I don't know bakit ang tagal. Probably, I think we just have to wait. Hmm. Okay, other than that, I'll probably. Hmm. Okay, the good thing here is even though if we have technical difficulty on checking out the base application, we have dartpad.dev. So dartpad.dev is a very cool IDE online, which very lightweight IDE, which is capable of running a Flutter app. So you just have to visit dartpad.dev, and you can just choose here. Oh, it's lagging a bit. Why? Just choose here the hello world sample. And just close this one, close this one. Right. So this is essentially the very first Flutter app that you would have to encounter if you run the command flutter run dash v. So it's a cool thing that to note that the widget, it's either stateless or stateful widget. So widgets that are stateless don't have internal mutations or internal data state changes that happens during runtime. Meaning, for example, if the application that we have here don't hold variables such as, for example, string age, and this doesn't actually change at all, then and this is declared as final, pretty much this is a state or a variable that doesn't change during runtime because there's no function that calls it, there's no function that updates it. So we try to use stateless widget for that because it's really unnecessary if you try on creating a stateful widget for a widget that doesn't involve internal state changes. Again, internal state changes, it's not a buzzword, just refers to these type of variables that actually change when you open your mobile app. So for example, this one is a variable that changes during runtime. So if ever try pressing this one, set state, which is a callback included in a state object, allows itself to rebuild this build method that we have in Flutter. So for stateless widget, we have We also have the build method, but with stateless widget, this only happens once. So every time you load your widget, it just calls this function once. So that's the build method. It's responsible for painting the widgets you have in your Flutter application. Unlike set state, we still have to create a state object which is responsible for managing internal state changes every time we call or invoke the set state function or other callbacks that leads to internal state changes we have in Flutter. So we can try exploring what are the available widgets in Flutter. So for example, we have a column. Column is responsible for, it is very hard. It doesn't have a very strict, uh, you know, intelligence. So I just have to guess it. Hello. So we have this widget. So again, this column is a widget. This text is a widget used for, surprisingly, displaying a text. So if you try running it, you'll pretty much see that there's a hello and hello one. If we try to convert it on row and try running it, it gives us a widget that displayed side by side horizontally. Last but not the least is we have the stack. I'm just sharing with you the widgets that we're going to use in the prototype challenge, so you'll be familiar with them as we use them together. So stack. So with stack, the as you can see the changes here. But if we try adding more text in front, it's responsible for displaying the widgets that are overlapping. So the first text hello is at the back. The second text 1, 2, 3 blah 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 is at the top of that specific widget. So I guess you're now ready, learning what is column, row, and stack. I guess we could actually start with Flutter because everything in Flutter is declarative as we try on create our UI. For example, you need a text, then you call a text. If you need a box with an icon, then you'll see later how easy it is for us to create UIs. Oh, it's actually here. So we're done with that part. So I'll just try to close this, and and encourage everyone to go visit the website and open Simple Course app. So Simple Course app is the starter pack application that we're going to use here, in which we will learn how to import assets, how to create our custom widgets, and a lot more to it. So there's state changes. Okay. The first thing you have to consider doing is dev starter pack. You have to switch the branch. So git checkout dev starter pack, press enter. Okay. So in this starter pack app, we just have us we just have an empty screen displaying a text welcome. So you just have to run it. Flutter run -v. So VS Code actually includes a support for Flutter, so you could just simply press F5 to debug Flutter apps. But I really want to encourage you to, if you're starting with Flutter, to start with the terminal commands because it's really helpful, especially whenever you're trying to debug. So my error. So yeah, at least my error. So at least we get to fix this together. So there's an error, probably because I deleted this one, so you don't have to start with a very beautiful app right away. So I just tried on deleting that one. Just remove line 2 and 3 on the main.dart file. Just try to remove that one. Okay, I guess we're done here. Just try to remove that. And it's building, no? So yeah, head over to the Figma file if you have Figma file with Figma IDE with you, or Figma desktop app with you. This is the prototyping tool that I've used to extract the widget, created by, I think I've given credits to him. Yeah, it's Dribble by Simono. So he created this and uploaded it on Dribble. So it's his handle. This is the handle of Seaman 00. Yeah, pretty much next thing we have to consider doing is to expect, I'll just teach you how to extract assets, but if you have downloaded the assets, it's good. You could just simply import it later together with me. In Figma, you would just need to highlight the specific component that you would like to export. So highlight and try to export here, export menu, and yeah, just press save and you'll receive a pretty much a menu icon. So I have to screen. So this is the menu. And that's what I did for the assets. That zip. So if you have the time, please download it now because this one's taking time really. Probably I have, well, I can restart during the talk. Yeah, it's building. Okay. So first thing we have to consider doing again for this assets part. We're already on the assets part because we've done the Flutter create part. We have to open the directory. Okay, so this is the directory of the simple course app, which we have in the GitHub page. And you just have to copy the assets that you've extracted. So copy the assets at the root directory. So this has all the icons, including my profile. Just change it with your own profile, fonts, uh, and yeah, we could pretty much start coding. So this is the error because we haven't removed the import. Just have to run it again. And the next thing we have to do is load the directory, which is the assets, inside the pubspec.yaml. So pubspec.yaml, we have the assets. Well, we can actually load these assets one by one, like for example, assets, images, and the name of the asset that we have. But since we are just trying to import everything anyways, we just have to import the directory. So the cool thing about Flutter is every time you generate a Flutter project, it has this sort of documentation where it helps you format. If you try to uncomment it, it's already formatted for you, so you won't get any uh, issues on compiling this one. Next is we have fonts. So let's try to start adding our fonts. Even me, I still have to look for the right format. So family, I name it Avenir. We have the asset. So as you can see here, we have assets folder, fonts. You just have to import this one relatively to the pubspec.yaml. So pubspec.yaml is at the root directory, meaning it's at the very root and core part of your top level part of your directory. So if it's the course application, then pretty much you can find the pubspec YAML file here alongside the assets folder. So they live together inside the root. Well, that's lib fonts bold .otf weight 700. That's for the bold. For the bold. This kind of sounds like a fun. Forgot this one asset. Next is we have the lights, which has, I guess I just have to ballpark at 300. Last but not least is assets fonts normal .otf, new normal OTF. OTF. Just have to hot control Z. I'm having, yeah. Just have to, okay, hot restart it. What's the Figma file? So the Figma file is included in the Dribble account of the creator of this prototype. So you can find the Figma file there. But nonetheless, if you've had the access to the assets.zip, we pretty much don't need the Figma file anymore. Not unless you want to do the course app your own. But yeah, that's available in the Dribble page. Sorry for not including it inside the website because I just want to really credit the owner of the design and the prototype in Dribble. Thanks, Harvey, for asking. And yeah, we have included the assets. Public get is just verifying. So in here, we've done creating, loading the assets. Now we're starting to create the course list screen. So the course list screen is this one. So this is the thing that we're going to create. And yeah, I just want to share this with you. And structuring your Flutter app, consistency is the key. So I guess you'll probably have research if you have the experience building Flutter app. What is the best structure of a Flutter app? At least for me, there's this kind of gives you the flexibility how you would like to design your or structure application. So for example, if you have started creating screens, like for example, we will create course home, like home screen. If you have started doing something like this, then you just have to be consistent, adding other screens here, other adding other widgets that are shared globally here, and probably you may want to add services, other services on a very definitive directory. Just have to be consistent. No, there's no best practices, no best structure, best way of structuring your app. You have the flexibility of doing it your own. So we'll start with creating the screen itself. So coursely screen. First thing you have to do is home screen, home screen.dart, and you have to create a stateless widget, home screen, extend stateless widget. Great. So just have to import the material package and override the build method. Okay. So to verify that this actually screen exists, I'll just add hello and call this one. Oh, it's a bit slow. Okay. So call this one inside the main function by adding main, replacing the home. Well, literally, you don't have to. Uh, Basically, you don't have to literally name your home screen a home screen. Probably some of you may name it dashboard, but this is the home parameter inside the theme, the material app, which is responsible for running the application with the help of the material design guidelines and specs for it to be able to. I have to. This is a bit. So I'll try to import this one on the main.dart file. So I guess it's not resolving. So every time this happens, you just have to quit your Visual Studio Code. I'll just quit this one. Try to open this one again. Okay. I just restarted my ID, because it's a bit slow actually, because probably. Okay, where's the code? Oh, it's black screen. Right, so this is the Dawn file. And where's the simple course? Okay, I guess it's here. Whew, it's a bit hot here. And we'll just try to split screen with the simulator. By the way, if you are building apps for iOS, you have to use a Mac OS device. Unfortunately, Apple uses a closed system, which doesn't expose APIs, which allows you to build applications for iOS in either Linux or Windows. So I'll just try to run it again and continue building our home screen. Just wait for it to run so we can confirm that this screen is actually added. So as we inspect our Figma file, we have here an element, at least in mobile, we call it, in material design, we call it an app bar, which can be added using an app bar widget. Okay, it's running. Let me know if you have any questions or difficulties on running the application from GitHub, and I'll try to help you. Okay. Oh, I forgot to import. At least no, we're encountering some bugs. Na we can at least we can see how we can actually fix them. For example, this is a problem with relative or absolute import with the package. Just have to import the screen for it to finish. Oh, it's slow. Hmm. Okay. I guess your computer might be running as faster as mine right now because probably this computer was open for almost 2 days. Uh, okay. Great. So we're still in the course list screen. Nonetheless, if it's this is just the first time that this is actually slow because as it gets the dark code cached and saved in the VM, other changes during hot reload should be fast enough for you to be able to see the changes. Probably this slow compilation happens to me because I haven't restarted my laptop for 2 days now. Great. So we're still building. Probably just have to optimize some of my. Uh, I'll just close Notion. Just close Spotify. Just close. I won't close Figma. Great. So let me try to debug uh, memory. What's happening? Oh, I've used certain. Oh, Docker. Come on, Docker. I'll just quit Docker for a while. Ah, infinite loading screen. Docker 2.1 gig. Java. I need that for running a Dart app. CPU. Uh, I'm on 6 threads, 6 CPU cores, eyeglasses. Google Chrome. Pretty much Google Chrome is using 186% of the CPU. At least the compute. This is pretty much weird. So if I close the Google Chrome, then pretty much I'll pretty much end up closing this live stream. Nonetheless, I guess the app is already running. Woo. Yes, we built our very first app. Great, thank you for waiting. And this is home screen. So home screen, you just have to first and foremost create a scaffold. So scaffold is allows you to create with the help of material design, allows you to create a specific page that abides the rules of creating a material design app. So for example, it has a property of app bar, it has a property of a body, which pretty much gives you the capability of following the guidelines without worrying too much of the constraints. So the first thing that we have to add here is the okay, the first thing we want to add here, I'll just hook up my terminal. Okay. Home screen. I'll just close this one. Just trying to open. I have a cheat sheet now. Para if every time every man na magkaroon tayo ng technical difficulty, I guess just simply copy paste the code. But we should be discussing the widgets that we add one by one. And I guess I'm ready. Okay, it's a bit slow today, but we're getting there. So the first thing that we have to consider adding This is the typical setup. No, not in especially in work, you have a design specs and or design spec, and uh, you have the developer that works on the actual implementation of these designs. So kind of you think of it as kind of we're actually building the app together, created and provided by the designer of this dribble prototype. Just have to create the app bar for this one. As you can see here, they're on the very topmost part of the screen. Just have to create app bar. And as we try on refreshing this, oh, just try on running that. And the background of this one is white, so we'll just try to add the scaffold color to white, and we'll see the effect of adding upper in a bit. Oh, it's running again. So there's an error a while ago. So again, this just happens in my machine because probably haven't started my machine for a while now. But I guess some of you guys who are already following this course can start doing it. And yeah, for this one, I'm seeing it as an app bar. This one, you need a column. Later on, we'll see that in actions. It's a bit slow. Right. Hmm. Okay. Right now, we're not seeing any changes, but I guess, yeah, just wait for this one to finish. This is running slow. I'll try to switch. Try to switch. I'll try to switch using a real device. Excuse me. So, try to connect. I'm closing the iOS for now. I'll try to connect my Android device. I'll stop it here. And I'll just try to connect SERCPY. Okay. Pretty much this is my Android app. So this is my home. So this is my home screen. You can see here I'm using these term apps for me to be able to keep my things organized. Flutter run. So the cool thing about Flutter is you can build apps for iOS and you can build apps for Android pretty much by using the same code base. So as you can see here, I just switched on building an Android app without switching the code base. So I just switch the device I'm using because apparently my simulator probably has a lot of derived data already and cached for 2 days. Great. So this is my personal device. Hopefully, walang tumawag, no? Like for this specific demo, for my contacts, do not try to call me. Right. I guess this is a bit much faster because using a real device is a bit faster than using an emulator because emulator and simulator for iOS uses a lot of at least part of your memory, some compute power, some of the disk reads because it has to virtually cache itself to this by swapping to the memory if you have less memory available, and we're still building the app. Okay. So it's still building. Yeah, it's invalid reason outputting Flutter assemble. We're almost there. Again, we're still in the app bar part. Use the comments. All right. Yeah. Right. You can actually ask questions. How to be yours. Yeah. I almost forgot. Shout out to programmers, developers, especially to Sir Jello and slash Ariel. So yeah, shout out to them for helping us promote Flutter. As last year we just started. Every one of us is just beginner on using Flutter, and as we progressed, programmers, developers still there, together with TechPH, helping us to promote Flutter with everyone, especially here in the country. And it's still running. So if you have questions, just feel free to comment down below. And we're watching together. Okay. All right. We're almost there. This is my device. Whew. Again, this is just for the first run with a slow machine that hasn't been restarted for the past 2 days. So this is the app bar. We just have an empty app bar. If you want to see this, we have two elements. So we call that leading, which is denotes that this icon as is at very top. Can I see the PubSec YAMLs ever? Sure, I'll push the commits later to the master branch of the repo. Okay, so what we want to do here is to have an icon button, since pretty much this is an icon which is, clickable. So we have an icon button API from Flutter. So API meaning, just an application programming interface for you to be able to use this widget to display an icon button. So the icon, you can just inspect it in the Figma file. We have a size of 24 and a width of 24. We have a width of 24. Yeah. And in this one, I'll show you how you can use your asset that you previously imported, if you're following, imported a while ago. So images, menu.png. Okay. And it is showing a warning because you are required to add a callback. So my practice, typically in work, I just print uh, the menu, then click. This is how I create widgets with callbacks for press. Let's just try to press R. Oops, at least, no, medyo mabilis siya. Different people, same Chrome, realm having problems. Right, mag-Microsoft Edge. No, I just forgot to restart yung laptop bago mag-start. But pretty much I still use Chrome for a lot of things. But yeah, thanks for sharing Edge. I haven't tried the Chromium based one. So the cool thing here is with this one, we could actually, as you can see here, we can change the color of this app bar, because in our design we have a white background for the app bar. So background color, white. Okay, press run. And as you can see here, there's a bit of shadow here. So that's elevation. Just have to set it to 0. What we're talking about here, like elevation, background color, leading, is all available in the material.io, which is a very widely accepted design guidelines and specs for creating mobile applications. So it's cool, no? We already have a button. It's printing. Click. Okay, next thing we have to consider doing is actions. So actions are buttons that are added at the very end of the app bar. So I want to add my picture. Shameless plug. You can add your own picture here. Padding, we have a padding which we'll be adding later. Child, just have to copy, no, yung icon button, since this is also a button with an image. And copy, paste. Just have to set the asset to profile. And you can see here that it's needing a, a padding. So padding cons. Probably we just have to add padding to the right, because by default it's not doesn't have any padding at the right part. Whew, I can see my face there. So depending on the size that you want, you can just simply add your and it's also clickable. It's cool, no? So the cool thing here, I just have to change profile click. So I know that keep track of the button clicks. It's easy, right? We have added the app bar with a bit of commercial on waiting, but right now we're hype, no? We're hype on continuing to create other UIs of the application. So right here, we'll just try to display, hey, Joshua, and find a course you want to learn. So we've learned earlier that if ever we want to display UIs vertically, we will be using, you guessed it, the column widget. So we are already actually haven't added a body to our scaffold. So body, call center, just added center, child, column. Oh, column again, it just pretty much adds your UI vertically. Thing here, we'll just add, hey Joshua, copy. And the good thing about having the Figma file with you, Harvey, you have download this one. Just have to place, and it's there. Also, I almost forgot to mention that in the app that you're using, we are already using the Avenir font. So if I try to comment this one, this pretty much looks the default font, which is, I guess Roboto for Android. So bring about the font. And the next thing we need to add is the styling. So this is how you would design a text in Flutter. So again, we don't have external design language. You just have a very direct way of adding designs in Flutter. So style, I'll inspect the Figma. This is how you normally do it in your work. 28. The color is, I'll just use black. Black is the default and it's bold. So font weight, remember the font weight we added earlier? You can either use font weight dot bold or dot seven v700 w700. Next thing is we want to change the size to 28. This is not I'm not estimating the sizes here, guys, so I'm just following along with the specs given by a designer, sort of, from the dribble prototype. So hey scores, so I'll continue doing this one. I'll style widget. We just have to stretch this one so it actually stretches itself. Alignment that's stretched. So I don't have IntelliSense right now, but hopefully whatever things I've had here actually works. So it stretched itself, and the next thing we want to do is to probably add padding for each of the object that we have, or each of the widget that we have. So again, padding is just straightforward. Add padding and add a padding constant, or even if it's not a constant, you should be able to do that. Touch insets. So I don't really have an IntelliSense right now. So what's the best laptop for coding? I guess for if you're targeting, I'm actually using a 16-inch Mac, but yeah, pretty much it's a bit slow tonight. I guess a good RAM, probably 8 to 16 gigabyte of RAM. That's an SSD, 256 should be fine. CPU, probably Intel. i3, i5 should work fine. But yeah, I'm encountering such issues even if I try this one. It's a good thing that you have to restart your laptop. So again, what I'm doing here is I'm just adding a padding so I could just simply align this one properly. So probably 12 is a good one. And we'll just copy paste this one. Paano nagiging handle responsive? So we actually have a utility class. No, this is available in the pub.dev. It's called Flutter Screen Util. It lets you handle the the design of your widgets and the responsiveness of the widget without worrying too much about the computation. Pretty much you just have to configure some of the settings the developer or of the plugin sets. But if you're trying to do it from scratch, I pretty much would recommend it if you have the time to do it. But if you're someone who's needing to finish a Flutter project at a very fast rate, probably I'll recommend using a plugin instead, especially the screen util, which helps you deploy responsive screen sizes on different apps. And hope that answers your question. And we have to set the style. So as you can see here, we have the different font sizes here. 24, I'll just copy the color. Color. So this is how you normally instantiate colors in Flutter with custom types. So that's hexadecimals. FF here is just referring to the transparency. There's FF, it's a full white, full bright. And yeah, 24. So font size 4. Okay, that looks great. But I guess we could just simply change this to 30, I guess. So I could actually see it from my screen. That's a bit big. It's 24, but I'm trying to make it look. Just use 24. All right. Okay, so we're actually done with this part. Next thing we want to consider doing is the search bar. So for the search bar, we just want to create a widget. So we just have to close this one so we can work on the widgets. So search bar. Actually, we may not. Yeah, I'll just try to. Yeah, I think this is a bit tricky one, the search part. So I think we could just start with a predefined set of. Yeah, we can start with a container. As we inspected it in this Figma, its height has 60, margin, it probably has some margin at the top. So cons, edge insets, only top 40. And we also have a padding. As you can see here, there's a padding inside. We could just simply, what I'm doing here, instead of typing it, for us to be able to save time, we'll just copy paste the properties one by one so we'd actually see the changes. Right now, we'll not see the changes because we haven't added the color. So as you can see here, pasting the decoration. So decoration is just responsible for adding extra and additional designs on your container. So this decoration contains a color. It also has a color inside the container, but if you're using a decoration, you will have to add this inside this AP, this class. And the border ranges, it's just simply used for adding a bit of a curve for the app. So next thing we want to add is the padding. So the padding, and we could just simply write 24 with 12. Okay, I'm just adding a margin outside this container. Oh, this is left. Left. This one. Okay, so as you can see here, it's aligned. Next thing we want to add is a row, since a row is responsible for, again, displaying your widget horizontally. Children. And we want to add an icon for the search. We want to add copy, paste. So this is the icon for the search. We'll just use a size box, pretty much similar to the menu button. Next thing we want to add is a text field with a predefined design. to showcase. Yep. What we've added here is a text field. So text field is a widget for accepting text input from the user. So as you can see here, we have removed the border. If we haven't removed this one, if you try uncommenting this one, you'll pretty much see that there's a line at the very end. So what you need to do is to just add this five properties to disable. Oh. Oops. Okay, I'll just uncomment this one by one. Having I can do the key maps. Great. Great, so we now have here, we're almost done, no? Next thing we have to do is to just add this categories. By the way, this screen is already built for you, so if you're thinking that we almost spent an hour already, that's a good thing because I already prepared this UI for you guys to inspect and for us to be able to just focus later on a quick introduction to state management. So this one, I'll just create a widget. So I guess you can start doing the categories and see all. So what I'll be doing is to just create a row widget, which pretty much has, no? Again, in this specific, oh, okay, so in this specific screen, this is the container. So the container is just the, I hope you can still see this because I don't have enough space to actually view everything. This is just the row where we added, the search container. I'll give you the code after. So that's the text field. This is the icon. Next thing we want to add is the code for the categories and see all. So I believe you already know how to add text and row. Pretty much you could just change the styling, change the color and fonts for you to be able to experiment. So this is the latest one. So right here, again, whatever I'm doing here will be reflected instantly on an iOS device. So left, right, 12. Right, so as you can see here, it's very fast. It's reflected instantly. So what we have here is a bit of what we call a grid view inside material design. So good thing we have, don't worry about the code, I'll just share with you for us to be able to save time. But we'll try to focus on the important parts later. So grid view, we have a simple widget that allows itself to expand because this doesn't have any definitive constraints like box constraints. It allows itself to its stretch depending on the size or the height or width of its parent widget. So the API that we're going to use here is count. Essentially, if you are dealing with a large set of data, you would normally use gridview.builder. But in Flutter, if you're just using a few items, you pretty much just use gridview.count. Number of cross-axis, meaning number of columns that we have. And we will try to create a simple list of widgets. X. Hello. Oops. One. Oops. Condition like this. 4, 3, 2, and 1. I believe some of you are already familiar on using grid view, but yeah, pretty much this is the simplest way on how you would normally do that. I close this one. So this is the grid view. It allows itself to display elements under children with grid view format. And the thing that we have to achieve here is the specific components. I think this is the last component that we'll create for tonight. So as you would like to create a component, you could just simply create another stateless widget as you predicted, because it doesn't have any state that changes during runtime. So for example, this is marketing. This will be marketing on its lifetime because it doesn't have any state notations. If unless not unless if it has internal state changes for animations or some amazing API calls that you have for each of these. So we'll just try to name our component category box extends a stateless widget. Again, stateless widget because it doesn't have any state mutation. Okay, so for the question, what does the child aspect ratio do? So by default, grid view is responsible for setting up the height and width of your the items inside it. So you just have to pass on the ratio of the desired width. This is the width that you would like to have. This is the height that you would like to set for your items, because there's no property inside the grid view for you to be able to change the sizes explicitly. Because if you try on setting, for example, the height of this one, for example, 100, then it won't look good on other it won't look good on the apps because it doesn't actually handles the spacing between these two elements. So that's why that's the computation for the child aspect ratio is introduced instead of having the developer to compute manually the height or the width of the screen. For example, this is 100, then you'd have to compute for the remaining space here, which is typically not done because you may end up having more bugs. So that's for the child aspect ratio. It's setting the width. This is the width. This is the height. Width divided by height, you get the aspect ratio of the children of your uh, of your of your grid view. So here we'll just try to speed things up. Uh, Actually, this is just a short widget. So what we can do here, just copy the margin. So margin just gives us the spacing. That's one. Actually, you could manage that internally, but we just have to create something like this. And container also has this child property. So for the child property, we just want to use a clip rrec. This is responsible for including your image to be part of these container with a bit of border radius. Otherwise, if you try to add border radius inside the container, it would not clip the painted image, because assets or image assets are loaded kind of a different way, in such a way that it's painted on the UI, so it doesn't know the boundaries that it has, at least for the border radius and some other properties. So the child here, or the border radius is 16. The child that we want to have here, we've used column, we've used row, you've guessed the third, we will be using stack widget. As you can see here, these are three widgets overlapping with each other. The first one is the image, the other one is the text, and the second label. So we'll start with stack. You have to add is the image. So again, you have to explicitly, if you want to your image to look or display properly, you have to explicitly set the, I'll just probably images marketing.image, have to explicitly set the size, because we don't have explicit size outside this component. We forgot to add the children. So children, just have to add children. Okay. 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 this works, but it's not loading because we haven't called, yung widget. So the thing here, we have to remove this one and run. All right, it's there. So it's actually done. Yung colors, it's already there. So now, the next thing we have to focus on is yung text. So we have these widget. We have this widget called positioned. So in Stack, by the way, everything is relative to each other. So this relative to at least the constraints of the Stack widget. So this one is at the top of 24, so it doesn't care. It's not relative to the next widget to it, but instead relative to the parent Stack widget. So as you can see there, I added positioned, which surprisingly again positions a text, which is, I guess you already know how to style a widget. So that's how you would normally style a widget, marketing with font size 18 and a font weight bold. Again, I'm just getting the specs here: 18, bold, color black, and I guess you know how to add the next widget, which is the label. So for the label, so this is actually created a very dynamic widget for this one. Okay, just running. So 17 courses, and fun part here is we can now call category blocks. So in Flutter, this is how you would normally reuse a widget, and pretty much just have to save it. Right, so that's loaded. And if you want to have a specific properties, for example, you've seen that this has a different background, different title or text, you can just simply create properties such as the final string title. So this is how we normally create constructors and default properties. String int courses num. So that's the number of courses and the background image path. That's how would I create the widget. Create constructors, final fields. So here we would now start assigning the variables. So for example, instead of having a title or explicit here, we could just simply use image path. Instead of using marketing, we could just simply use title. Instead of showing 17 courses, we can use string interpolation, which uses the variable. We don't have enough time to discuss how the grid view is loaded dynamically, but I guess I could just share an article at the end of this talk or at the end of this webinar for us to be able to drop off things very quickly and just have to run title. But again, it's no different. It's no big of a difference if you try to use grid view builder using a typical so right now typical uh, grid view using count. So right now nag-error siya because we don't set the variables yet. So marketing image path, pretty much you'll just discover the path yourselves kung saan nyo inad images marketing.png image that path, and we want to set the number ng courses. So number ng courses sumobra na yan ako tab. So number ng courses num is 17. Try to see here UX design 25 courses. I'll just try to save this one. It works for the first one. And let's try to load the second one. UX design 25 courses. UX design UX 5. Again, what we are doing here is we're now loading the widget that we created together. So we're using the widget that we created instead of manually adding them as a nested widget. So photography, this is actually good if you have a dynamic set of data. For example, the data may come from the API or loaded from different set of logic and business domain you have for your app. That's the cool thing of having a reusable widget. You've learned how to create one. It's a bit slow, but we'll get there. Number of courses, 13. So we have 13 courses. And last but not the least is to add business, which has 20 courses. Business, business. Great. So we're done with the first screen, which actually summarizes the prototype challenge because we're actually done with the second screen as well. We're just here to, yeah, so that's the screen. So takeaway for this prototype challenge, you know the different widgets that you can use in Flutter. Column, which again inflates or displays the widgets uh, vertically. In the contrary, row, which displays the widgets horizontally. Third one is stack, which places the widgets on top of each other. And you've learned how to create your very own widget. So here, instead of using image that asset, you've created your very own widget in Flutter, which is a good thing about Flutter is it's composable, meaning, for example, if you want to create a separate app bar widget, feel free to create one. If you want to create a title widget, feel free to create one. No one's stopping you. Nothing stopping you from the framework to do it. It just depends on how you would normally standardize a process in your team. So last but not least is we'll try to just it was supposed to be included inside the widget, but we'll just try to add inkwell. Again, we have used inkwell a while ago for the icons for adding attach callback. Actually, we've added icon button, but yeah, pretty much this works fine too. On top, I guess on top, yeah. So here we have detail screen. So in your app, you just simply see that this is actually already made for you. And and for navigation, no, we're already done with the course list, navigation. Just have to add a navigation from the course to the detail screen. So don't have to worry about the second design because I've already made it available for you. Push. We have different ways on adding routes. We have material page route, we have name routes, but right now, since this is just a very basic example, hopefully I get the APIs right. Kasi wala talagang walang IntelliSense. So material page route, we'll just inspect kung ano yung nasa loob ng material page route. So this is a cool thing about Flutter being open. It's open source. You can inspect what are the properties that you have to pass. So builder. So the builder is actually, it's been a while since I've used this manually. Context, because I've been using name routes already for my apps. Context, right? So that's how you would add a route. Let's remove this extra curly brace. And we just have to open the screen, detail screen. Hopefully this works, no? So we have to import detail screen. It's already made available for you guys if you have downloaded. Again, it's not loading. IntelliSense is not loading because of the setup of my Mac. I just try to import it manually. Package, simple course app, simple course. Screens, details, detail, details screen dot dark. Okay, now you can see it there. It should be right. Right, so you should have this specific line of code, detail screen. I think this is detail. Yeah, all right. So run, and if try to press on yung UX design, try to press this one, it should navigate as to the second screen, which is already done for you. So you could actually review it at the end of this talk. And if we want to go back, we just, since we explicitly set the leading icon, we have to manually add navigator.pop, which is closing the current context available. So this is a current context. Ooh, it's a bit slow. I forgot to run this one. Just press run, pop, and you have to pass on the context. Yeah. Okay, almost done here. All right, it's actually cool. No, every time you press on UX design, you can open this page, which has this, a specific button. Okay, so I guess we're done with the prototype challenge and Google Fonts now. Again, lifting state up, sharing state. These are just some of the concepts that you would actually need to know for you to be able to get along and start with your Flutter projects. So state management is just simply, it's not a buzzword, it's just simply on how you would like to manage the state or the data that builds or determines what UI is actually shown in your screen. So state management is a way or practice of managing states. At least that's the canonical definition on similar on other programming languages and tools framework. And these are just the things that I want to emphasize. If you're just starting a Flutter application, you just have to start small. You don't have to necessarily use block provider or Mobex right away. Yeah, you could just either use either set state or even provider. No, provider is a good way of doing or managing states if you're just starting small or factor as you grow. So if you have these widgets that create that can be reused on the different parts of your app, then you can refactor that. You change how the way they pass data, and as you scale, keeping the same number of team members in the team while adding more and more features, you may want to start adding, architectural patterns in your application. Great. So this is just a basic formula on. This is just a basic formula that you have to understand. Every time your UI is built or presented to the user, it is equivalent to the build method and the logic you've added inside it, encapsulating the state that it has. For example, you've seen earlier we have a counter application. Every time we've changed something inside the counter application, this set state rebuilds itself. So this is a function for build. Rebuilds itself depending on the time you call or notify the framework that you want to update the state. And that's how your UI would actually look like. So for this example, every time I notified state nodes, I probably need to hide and show something during runtime. Then that's how the build method works. It understands what the states are available in your application, then it renders whatever widget you'd like to show depending on the state widget. So to simplify it, now we use set state for, at least a basic way of doing state management is using set state for showing that there's internal state changes. For example, a button is clicked, you have to increase the counter, and it's only available on stateful widget. And again, the practice in Flutter, if you can create a widget using stateless widget, it's a bit more recommended rather than making every widget the stateful widget, even if they don't have to manage states internally. So now it's a bit technical explanation. So let's try to see in action using some basic images that we have here. So every time, no, every time I change something on the build method. So for example, I've added a build logic is shown, is hidden. The build function will now work its way to actually notify the framework that it needs to build, the UI. That in turn creates the equivalent UI depending on the function and the states that you have set inside your code. Let's try another example. It's pretty much the same, but using dash an example. We have dash every time you set state inside a build or a state object, is will notify the framework that it needs to build the UI. So pretty much, just want to reiterate that every time you call set state, it rebuilds the UI. So the thing here you have to remember is you don't want to abuse calling set state, every time you rebuild the widget. So you have to handle it properly, probably just encapsulate it inside a button or inside a logic with a flag telling it that you shouldn't call set state when this is the state of the specific application. So again, that's just a set state, basic way of managing state in Flutter, which is, you know, the thing if you could build an app on this, it's recommended for small projects. Next way is we have this thing called sharing states in Flutter where we have different strategies. So the first one is constructor based. So as you can see here, we created a course. I think we have a course content widget in your application. You could just inspect that later. It's a strategy for passing a data down or below the tree. So the problem with this one is if we are trying to pass using constructor, for example, I have a lot of widgets here. For example, I have a lot of widgets here, and I've created, for example, image widget, and I have a lot more uh, widget to it. Pretty much, you have to create a constructor. For example, it accepts title, it accepts uh, title. So that's, as you can see here, there's a problem here. No, for example, if we try on creating more and more widgets at the bottom of this tree, you'll pretty much end up having to manage different multiple constructors for this type of widgets instead of actually saving it at the top level, then just retrieving at the very bottom. But what happens in a constructor strategy is you have to pass on the data below the tree again and again for it to be able to uh, render the widget or the state that you want to show. So for example, image title, and we have this widget caption. So as you can see here, every time I want to pass on the title here, probably it's not shown here. This widgets, even if it's not needing the title, will be having a title parameter because, well, they have to pass the title to the caption. So we'll see a way on how we can avoid that later. So that's constructors passing the state down. With another strategy, lifting the state up. So lifting the state up is just moving the reference to the state above the tree that needs it. So for example, if this needs a probably image comment rating, this needs an course ID, and this needs a course uh it's just title. This needs a course ID. So instead of actually passing or saving the data and requesting an API call here, which is a very expensive task to do, an API call. If you want to call an API here, but again, you still need to do or to call an API call here. The strategy for lifting the state up is we try to call the API at the parent widget. So course ID, API call. And instead of actually doing an API call here, just have to pass and go back to the constructor way of passing state. So instead of having this one to do an API call for it to be able to retrieve the course ID, this one doing API call, which is a bit expensive, which you just want to show the rating in the caption. You may want to cache, no? You may want to cache the course info already on the parent widget. So that's the strategy called lifting state up, meaning we'll try to put no the states above the tree that needs it. And for example, this needs the course ID as well, then you'll probably want to add another class here that will load a course ID via API call. So depending on how you normally structure your app, my recommendation is to keep the you know keep the API calls below the or above the tree that just needs it. So if it's there at the top most part of your widget and the child tree doesn't actually need to use that service, then don't actually place the service at the global part of your application. So you probably have to structure the way you like to design your app in such a way that it doesn't expose itself too much on the child widgets that it doesn't consume itself. Last but not the least is, which is my recommendation, is to use not the inherited widget, but provider. So provider is a very useful package for abstracting the inherited widget. So inherited widget is responsible for propagating the information below the tree. So we've seen here the issue on the constructors, right? So with inherited widget, we could just simply add the course ID here, and if this specific item doesn't need it, you shouldn't add a constructor. Pretty much, you can remove constructors here, and you can just simply fetch directly from the course ID from the API if you're using inherited widget. Right, so I'll just add it here. That's the cool thing about inherited widget. You could just simply fetch the state without going through series of widgets. So the good thing about is the benefit of rebuilding. So every time you pass on a title that or course ID that changes, this one actually rebuilds. So the problem here, every time you load here the course ID, it rebuilds itself. But right now, since we're using inherited widget, at least in theory, we can now then load course ID without passing through this two widgets, which is the parent of this caption ID, which gives you a bit more improvement in terms of the testability, granular builds, because this widgets will not build anymore, even if you try on fetching the latest data from the parent widget. And to be honest, inherited widget is a bit verbose. So, yung implementing it is like redoing everything that Flutter has done for us. So the cool thing here, we have a provider widget, which pretty much similar on the theory that we've talked about, but it gives you a simple way on managing state. Right now, we don't have enough time to discuss it, but at least you've known that this is actually a helpful one for using or starting to manage your state, even if it's a small or medium project. And yeah, this is the provider. You can just simply create an inherited widget equivalent class, which is either a change notifier, a value notifier. I won't introduce a lot of classes here. Just visit pub.dev/packages.provider. I recommend you reading that. Again, it's once been called that provider is inherited widget for humans because uh, how simple it is in comparison with implementing inherited widget from the scratch is way more easier than we would actually do if we try to do it from scratch using inherited widget. So the mindset that you should have for building an effective application is that everything that changes or that needs data, you have to pass it below. You don't want to your child widget to update. For example, this requests an API call, then this updates the screen. That creates, kind of an infinite set state rebuild, which is very expensive. Every time this calls an API call, it tries to rebuilds itself. That's what's been happening if you're trying to pass the state up, and if this course ID actually changes, because every time this course ID changes, this caption actually rebuilds itself. So the thing that you have to remember is whenever you're dealing with data, just have to pass it down below the tree. You don't want to pass it above the tree, but rather instead of actually passing the data above the tree, you can pass events instead. So events, this can be either callbacks, dispatchers, other buzzwords that you would normally encounter when you're using an architectural pattern. So, for example, this widget tells the parent widget that, oh, I'm done loading the course ID. You would probably do something for me, but you don't have to rebuild the widget. So you could do something like that without worrying that this child widget again will rebuild itself based on that change. So again, the classes that I would recommend you starting to look at is the change notifier provider, and consumer. What's next? If you're trying to start a project, set state and provider should be fine. If you're doing an MVP, small to medium projects, provider should be fine as well. But if you're working with a team, I recommend using Block, Redux, and Mobex, which is some of the most widely accepted community uh, architectural pattern. Okay, now the remaining thing for you to do is to actually deploy your app to the Play Store. We've learned that there are two types of widgets. The first one is the stateful widget, and the other one is the stateless widget. My recommendation for small to pet projects is keeping it simple. If you can use a set state widget in your app, feel free to use set state. If you can use constructors, feel free to use constructors if you're just working on a pet or small projects. But if you're working on a real project, probably you may want to follow clean architecture or start loving to use provider. Other than that, if you really want to scale up your team and your project, then you may want to standardize how you would structure your code base, because a lot of files might be affected when more and more features are added to your application. So you have to take into consideration uh, now the changes, because it might have a conflict in terms of the get commit. And yeah, pretty much that's it for me. Yeah, so if you have any questions, just feel free to ask it in the comment section. Figma or Adobe XD? I don't have a personal preference, but I use them both. Just recently used Figma because I find it really easy to export assets and it's very intuitive, the UI itself. How to have a fixed layout across different screen sizes? You would probably have to set if you want to have a fixed layout across different screen sizes. If you're referring to the fixed layout, probably you may want to set it at the very root tree of your application. So probably size box would do, or a container should be fine. Right. uh, I think it took a while with.
Yeah, I think that was very informative, and I think everyone was enjoying the walkthrough. So it wasn't just a talk; it was you showing them how powerful and how flexible Flutter is. And can you recommend anything, anywhere that they can go, Josh, that uh, they can learn siguro the basic functionalities of Flutter, to start for starters.
Okay, so uh, there's actually this course by Angela Yu, the intro to Flutter in App Brewery. So I suggest intro. I'll just share the link with you later with the App Brewery, but I guess I have it here. App Brewery to Flutter. Right, so I have it here. I'll just share it with the live comment. I don't think I can comment in the, but I'll just share it in the private chat. Right. So this
Okay.
is actually one of the basic course that you could try. Other than that, the documentation of Flutter is actually solid. Flutter.dev, you can never go wrong with Flutter.dev.
All right. And what other communities can the guys join to get support in their journey to learning Flutter, especially those who doesn't have any experience in mobile development?
Great. So I've added the link to the website. So flutter.ph, just visit our website, and we have the Facebook page where you can collaborate with fellow Filipino developers who are using Flutter as well for their day-to-day work or their projects. And we've also linked a Facebook group, which is Let's Flutter with Dart. A fellow GDE of mine actually created a group with almost 18,000 members, sharing Flutter stuff, open source projects, which you could actually use for your own personal projects. So that's flutter.ph, and you'll see the links inside our group for you to be able to join other communities in Flutter. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Josh. And I think just one last comment here from Earl.
Okay, last comment. Uh,
So Earl is saying that Flutter is still quite a young, is still quite
mhm.
young in terms of its community. What's your approach if I'd like to use native API that's not available yet with Flutter integration?
Okay. So the cool thing about Flutter is it doesn't really constrain you on the native API. So we have this, I'll share the link with you, Luis. We have
Mm-hmm.
this concept of platform channels. So, for example, if you want to communicate with a native API that it's not available as a package or a plugin, then you'd normally use a platform channel. So, it's a low level binary messaging between the Dart host and the native counterpart. That's why you've seen here that there's actually a folder here, the Android directory and the iOS directory. So, under the hood, widgets are plugins are created using platform channels. So instead of the developers no talking to the native APIs ourselves, the plugins help us automatically use the APIs written in Dart, but under the hood talks with the Android or iOS APIs using platform channels. So I suggest reading more about on platform channels is yeah.
All right, thank you for that. And personally, I'm still taking the app brewery course on Flutter. Its
Mm.
introduction to Flutter. I can attest to it that it's very easy to follow. The instructions are very easy to follow. I think one of the challenges, as pointed out by one of our viewer, is that Android Studio will probably require a more powerful PC, right? Especially when you're using, I think when especially when you're using an emulator and all that. So personally, that's my experience. It takes some time to load. I'm using an old Mac, and although with the Mac you can use the iPhone's emulator, but if you don't have the good one, the newer one, you'll probably have to upgrade as well. So I think earlier we've talked about the minimum specs, Josh. And can you tell that to everyone again? Like, what's your recommended specs for everyone who would like to invest on their device and learn Flutter as well?
Right. So my personal recommendation, especially for Android and iOS development, is at least 16 gigs of RAM. If you can do 16, 8 should be fine. For the SSD, for the hard drive, I'd either recommend SSD, so probably either 128 or 256 GB should be fine. For the CPUs, it doesn't require that much computing power, because it's just painting directly on the uh, the graphics card on your devices. So probably i3 or i5 should be fine. But if you have an i5, which is the late on the latest generation, that should be better. Other than that, yeah, I think memory, CPU, hard drive doesn't require pretty much a big, like in terms of the game development, just requires a very minimal specs.
Okay, yeah,
Other
that's
than
very
that,
nice to hear.
yep.
Yeah, my laptop was just is just really old, so I can't finish the later part of the course. But maybe that's just me
Yes,
giving out excuses.
yes,
So
of course.
thank you so much, Josh, for your time. It's been a wonderful experience, and I think our viewers are learning a lot tonight. And this is only the beginning of your for most of the attendees. This is just your beginning to learning Flutter and in mobile development as well. Next week, don't forget to attend our next session on iOS and Android native. We have two speakers who will share to us how you can do that, and join the community as well, Flutter PH. And it's good to be part of that community because you'll get the help of a lot of experienced professionals and maybe students as well who are learning Flutter as early as possible. So, and additionally, I've left the link to the Android developer role. So if you are looking for an Android developer job, or if you know anyone who's qualified for that or who's looking for a new opportunity, then you can follow the link. It's in the comment section. And guys, again, don't forget to also subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's very important because that's our way of reaching out to more Filipino students so that we can connect them to Filipino tech communities as well. All right. So
And
thank you,
sorry
Josh. Do you
if
have anything
do you
else
mind
to
if
say?
do you mind if I share this event with everyone?
No,
Right,
of
this
course. I
was
don't know.
so on June 20. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So on June 25, we will be having our International Flutter Day. We'll be hosting multiple webinars across the globe. So we'll have regional meetups, we have international meetups get to be given by speakers from Google. So we encourage you to watch this as well. And we also have an upcoming Flutter Hackathon, which is on 27 and 28. Just visit flutterhackathon.com. Then you just have to register. So we encourage everyone to join Flutter Day and yeah, flutterhackathon.com. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Josh, and yeah, thank you for bringing this up. I almost forgot about that. So join that event as well. So yeah, just one question: is this for free?
Yeah, it's completely free.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good thing about tech because you can always find a free community event or a webinar like this one, so you don't really have to spend a lot of money to learn uh, tech like Flutter. So, guys, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. It's been a wonderful 2 hours. Who would thought and would have thought, right? So thank you so much, Josh. And it was really, it's more than inspiring, actually. I'm gonna probably finish the course, uh, if not tomorrow, tonight. Okay, thank you guys, and see you again on our next session. That would be this Saturday. Have a great day to everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.
And thank you, Josh. Maraming salamat.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good luck to next event. Like
Yes,
we
thank
will
you. Si
help
ano
you
yan eh, si,
share the event.
yeah,
Ano yun?
thank you for that.
Anong talk?
Si Mac yata.
Right,
Uh,
right,
I'm not
right.
sure
Si
kung
Sir Matt.
matutuloy si Mac.
All
Pero
right.
not sure pa kung matutuloy siya kasi may kailangan yata siya asikasuhin, but he's gonna refer two people to do the Android native. I'm not sure what platform or framework they'll
Okay.
discuss. Uh, and also Zonily. Zonily will talk about I think iOS native. So that's ano, diba? What's the name
Sorry.
of the framework again? For
Swift.
iOS?
The language. The Swift.
Swift. Yeah, there,
Yes.
Swift.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he will talk about that. Sige. Good night, Josh. Thank you so much, and next time ulit.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, bye bye.